Raindrops. Okay, who do we have? Who do we have here? Oh, Deanna Johnson. Deanna Johnson. Hey, Carlos, my daughters flipped out when they saw you in New York at the Pride Parade. Love you, King. Oh, well, thank you. Tell your daughters I said hello again. We have fun. It was a fun time at the parade in New York City. So, all right, Ebony's coming on. Just so you guys know, she'll be here. Katrina B, I was waiting for you since yesterday. I know, child. Listen, Ebony and I had a lot going on. As you all know, we have several jobs. But the good thing is we wanted to wait until we got all the information so that we can give you guys a play-by-play on exactly what's been going on. So thank you for your patience. I wasn't, no. Carlos, don't be late again. It's 11:04. And I know some of y'all, not everybody, I know some of y'all got today off, child, because of the 4th of July holiday tomorrow. Been waiting 24 hours. I know. But we're gonna, it'll be worth the wait. It'll be worth the wait. Ebony's gonna hop on in a second. So that we can sit up here and break things down with the Diddy verdict. So I'm super thrilled that you guys waited patiently. Because I can't do this without Ebony, child. I can't. So listen, Ebony and I are busy, but as journalists, we wanted to make sure that we gathered all the information so that we can make a profound statement to you all. So I think we have Ebony in the chat. I'm going to bring up Ebony K. Williams, my friend. Oh, how can I describe Ebony even further? I mean, what I'll say before I break her on, and I will tell her again, Ebony clocked this from day one. Ebony has not been wrong yet. And that's the gag of the gag. All right. So raindrops, ladies, gentlemen, gays, and theys. True Crime Thursdays, okay? Give it up for the incomparable legal expert and my personal friend, the gorgeous mama, Ebony K. Williams.
Hey, my love. How you doing, sweetheart? I hate to
Hey,
keep you in the
boo.
raindrops waiting, but there's just so much. There's so much.
I'm sure your phone has been ringing off the hook since yesterday.
It has. And actually, let me see if this is better for us. Is this a better shot? Okay, yes, this
Yes, I
is.
didn't want to
This
tell
is
you.
better.
Listen, that's why I
Yes.
love live because we get to be all like, but yeah, that's much better, baby.
Yeah, that's much better. Okay, let's get this shot
Yes,
together.
yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, there
Ebony,
we are.
look. So Melissa said, I'm on a flight to Barbados watching you. This Wi-Fi better hold steady. Love you, Carlos. We love you too. But
We do,
listen,
we do,
no,
we do.
thank you so much, Melissa. So Ebony, listen, I talked about this before. I was 17, I was 16 or 17 when the verdict came down for
Mm,
OJ Simpson.
right, right.
When the lead juror mispronounced his first name, right? I would never forget that. I was in. Listen, the funniest
Yeah,
thing,
what
Ebony,
did
I
we
was
get?
in.
Orenthal,
Yes,
James.
Orenthal. I'm in
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
of all classes, Ebony. I'm in journalism class when the verdict came,
Mm.
and my journalism professor was like, we all gagged. Where were you, Ebony, when the verdict came down yesterday?
Oh, okay. I was gonna say it was 1995. No,
Oh.
I was in eighth grade social studies. So yes. Oh shit. Okay. So yesterday, fast forward 20 some odd years. So yesterday,
Yes.
I was home. I recently moved. And so I was home and I realized that there was fine because we had heard that there was a partial verdict the day before, right?
Yeah.
So we'd heard that there was a partial verdict on everything but one count. I think we all reasonably assumed it was the RICO statute, the highest charge, the most complicated charge, and the charge that carried the most weight for sentencing, that we knew jurors were stuck on, essentially.
Yes. Yes.
So myself and those of us that were on legal verdict watch, is what we call it, knew that probably we had about 12 to 24 hours, Carlos, before we would get a complete verdict. We knew that the judge would send them back, as he did, because if they got those counts in agreement that quickly, we knew that they could reach a unanimous verdict on all five of these counts, and they did. So the answer is I was home. I was on standby, on the ready, as the kids would say, because I knew that we would have a complete verdict, and I knew it would be a split verdict at that point. I felt very confident that we were going to get some convictions in some areas and some not guilties in others.
And that's the main thing that I would love for you to break down. So a lot of the raindrops, Ebony, um, they're they're not fully informed on exactly what the charges mean that he was guilty on and the charges that he was not guilty on.
Okay.
So we all would love for you to break it down for us because I'm also sort of like, okay, what happened to this?
Yep.
Even in my siblings group chat, one of my brothers said, how can he be found guilty of prostitution but not be found guilty on sex trafficking? So
Hmm.
that's just not a question. One of many
Yeah.
that somebody in my family had. So to update everybody, Sean Diddy Combs was found guilty on 2 counts of transporting individuals for prostitution, a violation of the Mann Act.
Mhm.
Okay. So before we get into what he was acquitted on, can you break that down for us? The fact that he
Yes.
was found guilty on 2 counts of transporting individuals of prostitution.
Absolutely, Carlos. And these are all great, um, and really important questions of distinction. So I want you and your brother and the raindrops to think of these charges as stair steps, okay? And part of the stair step is some charges, a la the transporting individuals for the sake of prostitution, share elements with some of the other charges, a la sex trafficking. They both of those charges, while different, and you see I'm holding my hands this way because one
Mhm.
is a less severe charge. The transporting individuals for the purposes of sexual acts, okay, across state lines, the Mann Act, the prostitution counts that he was guilty on, that is the least egregious offense of everything Sean Combs was charged with. So consider it at the bottom stair, if you will. Second level stair would have been sex trafficking. It also includes some of the same elements as this charge, Carlos King. It still involves the transportation of individuals for the purposes of sex, but it has additional elements that talk about force, that talk about coercion at a particular level, and that normally operate just in a larger scale. Okay, when you're talking about when you're going from prostitution to trafficking, think larger, more involved, more force, more coercion. Everything is more intense. All the elements are more intense on this one. And then the
Okay.
highest charge, of course, that we're talking about for this one is the RICO, the racketeering, the criminal enterprise, the using elements of your criminal enterprise and profits and currency from it to further the criminal activity. So that's the stair step. And what we know is he was found guilty of that first tier, the transporting of individuals for the sake of prostitution. And it's very important, Carlos and Raindrops and Carlos's brother, that the two individuals, we know who they are. It was the Cassie Ventura. That's one of the individuals that he is accountable on one count for. And then the second count is specifically related to his transporting of Jane Doe. Okay. Jane Doe, who we
Mhm.
heard from on the witness stand, talking about getting the $10,000 a month and et cetera. So between Cassie and Jane Doe, those are the two individuals that were enumerated in those two separate counts, Carlos, of transporting individuals across state lines for the sake of prostitution. Cassie and Jane Doe. the jury found him not guilty of that next tier up charge, which would have been sex trafficking. They did not feel there was enough compelling evidence, Carlos King, to hold him legally accountable beyond a reasonable doubt that the activities they heard about during the testimony met the threshold, the legal requirement, the elements needed to get to trafficking. They also found that the prosecutors failed to meet the elements and prove the case and everything needed for RICO beyond a reasonable doubt. Hence the not guilty verdict there.
And that's the thing, because we do have a lot of the raindrops who have been following you and I breaking this down since the inception of the trial. We have M. Crumby, who said, but there was some coercion, I thought, and I know that's something you and I talked about, but raindrops, listen, and I'll have Eboni break this down. Yes, you could possibly feel like it is, but remember, the juror's job is to see if he was found guilty, if the prosecution proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Eboni, can you break that down for us? That the prosecution's job is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt and what that means for us.
Yes, I love this. I like even how you framed that, Carlos, right? That, yes, we all heard some testimony clearly indicating coercion. We're not going to gaslight ourselves, right? We know that we read the transcripts, even though we weren't in the courtroom, and the jurors certainly heard some evidence that spoke to coercion. However, it's what you just said, Carlos. It didn't, per the jurors, they didn't feel the prosecutors made the case strong enough. See, y'all, keep in mind, raindrops, these are not absolutes. It's not, there is coercion, there's not coercion. There is force, there's not force. The question of law becomes, was there enough coercion to reach the legal threshold required to convict? Does that make sense? Is there enough force? Are we seeing enough pieces of evidence? Are we hearing enough eyewitness testimonies that we find credible? Are we having enough of a pattern established for us to believe beyond, to reach the threshold, to go from, okay, we see some coercion, but do we see coercion at a level that makes it appropriate to convict for trafficking? We see some force. We see there's a business enterprise for sure. Do we see that that business enterprise, Carlos, is operating at a level of strategy and criminal systemic play that meets the threshold of racketeering? I hope that helps.
No, it does help. It does help. And just so we're clear, he was not found guilty of racketeering conspiracy, okay? And he was found not guilty of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. Now, raindrops, if you've been watching this since day one, Eboni has always broken down, if the prosecution can prove that it was a criminal enterprise, right? They mentioned things of him purchasing for things with the business credit card of Combs Enterprises. So, Eboni, you have been spot on since day one about whether or not the prosecution was able to prove the case. A lot of legal experts, including yourself, has said that the prosecution overcomplicated some of these charges so that the jurors who listen, and I want you guys to understand this, all of us could have been called to be a juror, not just in this case, if you live in the state of New York City, but in any case. I'm not a lawyer. So and I want Eboni to break this down. Raindrops. Any one of us could have been a juror who never, ever, ever understood a legal jargon or language. And you expect us with our 9 to 5 to be able to understand an insurmountable amount of facts or allegations. And you expect us who have family, food to buy for our family. When you are a juror, you get time off of work. Your employer does not always have to pay you your full rate. You do get paid hourly to be a juror, but that money is minimum wage. And that money oftentimes cannot feed your family. So as a juror, you're
Mhm.
sort of like, and listen, we're gonna have a real conversation about this later. A lot of jurors are thinking about, I want to go home. I need
Yes.
to get back to work.
Yes.
So to overcomplicate a case of this magnitude is dangerous. But Ebony, break down to us about the fact that a lot of people are saying the prosecutors overcomplicated the charges and they should not have really applied the sort of criminal enterprise sex trafficking charges in this particular case.
Yeah, so many great points in that framing, Carlos. Number one, I'll go further. Even most jurors are not attorneys or don't work in the criminal justice system. However, even for those of us that do, even, sometimes you'll get a lawyer on a jury, or you'll get a probation officer, or you'll get somebody who has a higher level of understanding and knowledge of the system. And even those people, Carlos King, should not be tasked with doing the prosecutor's job for them. See what I'm saying? So yeah, I
Yep.
know this stuff in and out. I know it better than my own first name. But if I'm one of these chair 12 jurors, I have not been retained to make the case for the prosecution or Sean Combs. So it's y'all's job, prosecution and defense, to make it plain, particularly the prosecution. It is your job. You are the only person in that courtroom that has a burden of proof. That defense, as we talked about on a previous episode with the Raindrops, Carlos, that defense carries zero burden. Zero. No burden of proof. The prosecutors have the entirety of the burden of proof, and they are responsible to make it simple and plain for all jurors, whether it's somebody who doesn't know cat dog about the law or F. Lee Bailey on your jury. You have to walk them through piece by piece. First of all, I think in addition to the charges maybe being what we call overcharged, maybe too high of a threshold based on the evidence. And see, the only people that knew the evidence that they really had and what they didn't have were them. Many of us, Carlos King, in the legal expert field, when we saw the indictment and we read what they were charging him with, because of the historical success of federal prosecutions, because of the historical success of the Southern District of New York Federal Prosecutor's Office, there were some reasonable presumptions on our part, Carlos King, about what type of witnesses they must have lined up, about what type of evidence they must have their hands on. So some of us, I think, quite frankly, were maybe a little disappointed, if that's the right word, once we kind of saw the entirety of their case. Some of us were, I'll tell you, per the Homeland Security raids, when you tell me there were, I think, 70 some federal officers on the various Sean Combs properties, I can appreciate that they did recover firearms and ammunition magazines, but it was a lot of baby oil and Astroglide and platform shoes. And I was expecting to see more firearms and more things that really spoke to the racketeering and conspiracy pieces. So I think the overcharging is one piece, but my bigger issue, too many damn witnesses, Carlos King. 34 witnesses over the course of 6+ weeks of testimony is exhausting for a jury to conceptualize. You said it, Carlos. It's an overwhelming amount of content and witnesses and testimonies that they are being tasked to sift through and decipher and distill down and synthesize what this was said with that one. I'll go back. I said it on day one. I'll say it again. No disrespect to her as a victim and her own experience, but Dawn Richard offered zero evidentiary value, zero probative value to this case for what the prosecutors were charging him with. And when you give so many Don Richards and sex workers and this, that, and the third that really aren't landing the plane from an evidentiary standpoint, Carlos, but then you mix it up with the Cassie and the Jane Doe and the mama and the this and the Kid Cudi, the jury kind of can't even focus on what they're supposed to be focused on. They are tired and ready to go home. That's just a fact. And that's how you get people to say, they didn't give us, this is how it goes. Listen, I feel like something's rotten in Denmark with this dude. I feel like something's off kilter with this whole situation, but I don't feel like I was given enough direct evidence to say he did what they want me to say he did. And that leads to
Mhm.
not guilty every time.
Yes. No, thank you for that breakdown. And One thing that I heard yesterday was that, and Raindrops, listen to this because this was fascinating when I heard this. Diddy's defense team hired an expert, which I didn't know this was a job description or title, child.
Okay.
I'll say allegedly for the sake of it. Allegedly,
Okay.
Diddy's defense team hired a jury expert
Yes.
whose sole job
Mhm.
is to inform them of the type of juror they should be looking for when people are not subpoena, but when people are requested.
Well, yeah, but they're
I don't
going
know.
through what we call voir dire. So that's juries. Yes, yes, that is absolutely a very high paying job, by the way, Carlos, if you're thinking about a side hustle. Yeah,
So there's
that's a juror
that's a
expert.
job.
Yeah, that's a job. That's called that is a professional jury consultant or jury selection expert. And it is a very revered job. Most of the time, the people that do that job, Carlos King, have 20 plus years of trial experience themselves, either as a prosecutor or a defense or both. It's somebody who knows the ins and outs of the questioning that should be on that voir dire sheet. They know how to read expressions, facial and physical mannerisms, down to attire. Okay, that they really are tasked, and they're paid thousands of dollars per hour. Many of them, literally, they can be paid anywhere. I've seen jury consultants pay as little as $500 an hour. I've seen as much as $2,500 an hour for a jury consultant to go with you juror by juror by juror by juror, yay, no, maybe, yay, no, maybe, and get you a jury that's going to be conducive to your case.
Thank you for that breakdown. The other breakdown that people want to know is, please explain the racist origins of the Mann Act. So, Raindrops, I'll read the definition. I'll have Ebony take it away. The Mann Act, also known as the White Slave Traffic Act, is a U.S. federal law enacted in 1910. It makes it a crime to transport individuals across state lines or international borders for prostitution or debauchery or for any other immoral purposes. The act was initially intended to combat forced prostitution and human trafficking, but its broad language has been interpreted to cover a wider range of consensual sexual activities.
Okay. So from the racist standpoint, can you hear me okay, Carlos?
It's a little wonky right now. All right, we'll bring her back in. Yeah, but that's the Mann Act. So the Mann Act, which is so interesting, it used to be called the White Slave Traffic Act. I didn't know that. I never ever knew that. I never heard of that. That is so fascinating to me. I'm gonna bring Ebony K. Williams back in. Listen, guys, we're live. And Ebony moved into her new place, honey. Yes, Ebony. So I'm gonna bring her back in, Ray Joss, so she can break that down for us, because thanks for asking that question, because I had no idea.
Hey, baby. Okay, we're good now?
Yes.
Okay. So the racist origins, that's a great definition. So y'all get it. This started around the 1920s. So this is about 150 years old from a statutory lens. Now, the Mann Act was originated really for the sake of a very historic black sports legend named Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson.
Oh, the audio's wonky again, Ebony.
Uh-oh. Can y'all hear me
A little
now?
static. Let me see.
You know, let me
I know. Okay, go ahead. So she's gonna break down the act, because we need to. I know, child. No, this is live. So we're gonna make sure you guys hear every single thing, because we are going to
now,
school.
Carlos, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay,
Yes, go
better,
again. Let me
better.
see. That's better, yes.
Okay, so the Mann Act was a statute that originated to basically respond to white hysteria. So this is the racist part. A white hysterical reaction to a black man by the name of Jack Johnson, who was the very first black man to be the heavyweight uh, fighter of the world, boxer of the world. He won the title. He was an icon. He was the man. He was the myth. He was the moment. Before we had Ali and Joe Frazier, we had Jack Johnson. Okay. So he was a huge deal, but he made it his business to walk around in his fur coats and his wealth. I mean, he's one of the most famous black men in the world at this time, as the first heavyweight champion of the world. And the only thing was, Carlos, he also enjoyed white women. Okay, let's just get it plain. He did. He enjoyed walking around the streets of New York and Chicago and whatever with one or two or three white women on his arm. Yes, he did. And at the time, there really wasn't any mechanism. Like, obviously, society hated it, white society hated it, racist white America hated it, but there was nothing they could do about it because these were his girlfriends. So the legislators went and did what they did, and they created the Federal Mann Act, which essentially was designed to be able to prosecute this one individual black man who had the audacity to walk around with white romantic partners on his arm. And so and he would often take the train with these white women, Carlos, and go from city to city. And, this was the original flued out, I guess, you know? Um, and so, and he was just living his best life with these white ladies. And the government said, not on our watch. They passed, voted, and enacted the Mann Act, which, like you said, they call it the white slavery law, to protect the purity of these poor white girls who must be with this savage black man against their will, because there's no conceptual reality in which they would be consenting and willing to participate with this white, even though one of these white women eventually he married, by the way, Carlos. But that's the origin story. And eventually they did convict him. Let it be known, they did convict him after 2 attempts of violating the Mann Act, because he didn't stop walking around with his white women. And he ended up serving about a year in jail. And then upon his release, I think he married the white woman. Yeah. So that's a little bit of a
Listen,
history lesson.
listen, raindrops. If you don't have a friend like Ebony K. Williams, who off the dome, so because I want to explain something to the raindrops.
Yeah.
Me and Ebony do not prep for this. We don't talk to each
Mm-mm.
other before we do this.
Nope.
I want you guys to understand. You know me. I like to brag on my smart friends. Ebony had no idea I was going to ask about the Mann Act. So the fact that she broke down the Jack Johnson boxer of it all, I
Yeah.
am floored by that, but I'm also floored by the genius of Ebony K. Williams. And you see why some of these girls from reality had a problem with my sister, baby. Because, baby, if Ebony K. Williams is like a freestyle rapper. You ask her to
Mhm.
freestyle, she gonna. Sorry, Ebony, I like bragging on you. Okay,
No, I love
so
it. Thank you, baby.
I'm
But that's
impressed.
that's true tea. That's true tea. But yeah. So it definitely has these racist roots, the Mann Act. And in fact, little fun fact, pre-trial, Puff's original legal team that had a brother on it filed to dismiss these 2 charges. These 2 um transporting individuals for the sake of prostitution, under the legal argument that they were racist and that the federal government in this case was just trying to punish a wealthy black man for enjoying his sex life. Yeah, ultimately that claim was denied by the judge, and then the brother left the defense team. That's when the brother said bye-bye. I don't know if that's why, but that was
Yeah.
when. Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's get into what was denied. So, Ebony, when Diddy was found not guilty on the counts of sex trafficking in RICO, which were the biggest charges that Ebony
Yes.
has talked about since the inception of True Crime Thursdays, when I say 100% of lawyers across all channels said, okay, Diddy's defense attorneys are going to ask for bail and they should give it to him based on the fact that Puff was found not guilty on the more serious crimes.
Right.
Every lawyer said that it just makes the most sense for Puff to be able to have bail until he gets his sentencing on October 3rd of this year. Diddy's defense attorney offered a $1 million
Right back.
bond. Okay, so raindrops. Diddy's defense attorneys requested a $1 million bond. Okay, every attorney said that based on the facts, if this was any other person, okay, so raindrops, hear me loud and clear.
Mhm.
Every attorney said if this was any other person that was found not guilty on these charges, every judge in America would have set them free to be in terms of bail until the sentencing on October 3rd. Long story short, raindrops, letters were submitted by Cassie and other people talking about how dangerous Puff is. If Puff gets out, even if he had an ankle monitor, even if they confiscated his passport, his private planes, a lot of people submitted letters to the judge stating why he should deny bail because they were saying that even if he is on house arrest, he would be able to still do allegedly harmful things to them or try to coerce people to do those things. Long story short, it was a shock around every legal expert when the judge ultimately decided to deny
Mhm.
bail for Puff. Ebony, were you also surprised by that? And why do you think the judge denied it?
I was surprised by that. That's one of the few things I will say, Carlos King, that genuinely surprised me in this trial and from this judge. Only because you're right. There's just kind of a certain way in which these things tend to go per the facts. And the fact is, this is Sean Combs' first conviction of any kind. Okay. That criminally, let that be known. He's considered a first time offender as it is defined in the law. He was acquitted of the much more egregious charges, and he's already served 10 months in custody. So we call that time served, and he will get credit ultimately when he is sentenced in October for time served. So it's like you kind of think of that 10 months, Carlos, as like something on the books, right? Like he kind of has 10 months
Mm-hmm.
on the books, so to speak. So you have almost a year to hang over his head from the judge's perspective. Um,
Right.
Prosecution's asking for 10 years maximum that he could be sentenced to. Normally, that's not going to be what's administered. So we have to reasonably anticipate Sean Combs could get sentenced anywhere from, if I had to guess, 8 months to 3 to 4 years maximum, but you've already served pretty much 1 year already. 99.9% of judges in America would have released him on pre-sentencing bail. This judge deviated from that, and he told us why. So we don't have to sit and wonder, raindrops. The judge was very clear as to why he deviated from the expectation of allowing Sean Combs to go home on some type of monitored release until sentencing in October. And he said the reason why, Carlos, is that Sean Combs is a very violent man, period. Even though what he was convicted of in this courtroom were what we deem to be non-violent criminal acts, the transporting for the sake of prostitution, that doesn't carry a violent element to it. But that judge saw that videotape just like we all did. That judge heard testimony that maybe he found credible, that maybe some of the jurors did not. And he has ultimately concluded, Carlos King, that Sean Combs, the defendant in this case, who has been acquitted of major charges, convicted of more minor charges, and according to Judge um, Subaranian, Sean Combs is a violent man who must still be under the watch of the federal government until he is completely sentenced for his crimes. That's what we heard yesterday.
Jeff Lewis has a question. Can his lawyers ask again for bail?
Yes, and they will. I'm sure they will. They
Mm-hmm.
can renew their motion to seek bail, and they can add to the plea. You know, Your Honor, just like what we saw pre-trial. We want to offer up more properties for the bail, because I think the bail's only $1 million. Here's the thing, though. I don't think this judge is worried about Sean Combs being a flight risk. Let's go back to bail 101, Carlos, because I think we skipped this because we started in the trial. Bail assesses two elements, and only two. The one most people are familiar with, Carlos, is the insurance that the defendant comes back to court, right? That's the one that we're mostly hearing about when it comes to bail, is putting up enough money or enough collateral, properties, deeds to houses, turning in your passport, making it plain to the court that I do not intend to flee the jurisdiction, jump state or country, and that I intend to come back and be heard and have my day in court, whether that's for trial or sentencing. That's the flight risk component. But there's another equally important component, Carlos, and that is this defendant, if released from custody, posing a threat to society? Okay, there's an element of concern for public safety that is as important as the possibility of the defendant fleeing the jurisdiction. We only, for some reason, I don't know why we talk about it this way colloquially. We always talk about, oh, he's good for it. He gonna come back. He turning in his passport. He's giving out $50 million, excuse me, worth of property. Sean Combs is willing to put Janet's passport on the table, the kid's passport. He's making it clear, ankle monitor me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to come back to court. That's not their concern, Carlos. Their concern is that upon release, even on house arrest, because of the nature of the freak-offs that we know still were taking place, even after his homes were raided, by the way, up until he was cuffed and carted away to custody, this judge is saying, what reason do I have to believe that your behavior now would look any different than it did then? And that there would still not be individuals harmed by your hands in some way during your release on bail. And the judge is saying, not on my watch. I know you to be violent. I know you to be problematic. Maybe not to the level that was conviction worthy in this case, but I do know you to be a violent man, and I'm not comfortable letting you out because I believe you would pose a risk to the public safety. That's what he said.
Yes, and raindrops, it now hit me. That's the reason why the video of him harming Cassie, okay, is suitable in this case, because the judge obviously looked at the fact that I've seen you put hands on a woman. It's evident that who knows what you'll do. That's the reason why raindrops, Kid Cudi's testimony of Puff, blowing up his car is important, because the judge is possibly thinking, would you send somebody to blow up somebody else's car? Would you send somebody to beat up somebody? How do I know? Yes, you could be on house arrest, but how do I know you won't call people to come into your home to have freak offs? So I didn't think about that. So that's the reason why when it comes to those things that people are saying, he's not on trial for DV, and he's not. He
No,
was
he's not.
not.
Yeah.
However, when those things are used as evidence in some form or degree, I now understand why the judge can say the juror obviously did not see those things as a way to convict you of other charges, but as the judge, if I free you, who's to say you won't blow up somebody else's car, and who's to say you won't allow individuals to be in your house for a freak off? So thank
Yeah.
you, Ebony, for breaking that down
And one
to a
more thing
science.
about that, yes, for the judges that they're very sensitive around this issue, Carlos, around pre-trial and pre-sentencing release, because there have been instances, too often actually, where, bless me, so sorry,
Bless you.
thank you, baby, where someone is hurt. There have even been instances, Carlos, I don't think this would apply in this case, but someone is killed, bless me, during that release. Thank you. And the blood ultimately is on the hands of that judge. Now, I don't think that's right or fair necessarily, but these judges, for the most part, now it's different with federal. They do enjoy lifetime appointments because they go through a confirmation process with the U.S. Senate and all of that. But still, no judge, Carlos, wants it to be forever known that it was literally on their legal watch that so and so was released pre-trial or released pre-sentencing, and then they raped somebody, beat somebody, killed somebody. And well, how did that happen? I thought they had been convicted of something. Yeah, but Judge so and so let him out on release. See how that
Hmm.
goes? And then that follows
Yeah.
that judge the rest of their career. So that's why,
Yeah.
although we all tend to legally agree that this looks like it was qualified for pretrial release or pre-sentencing release, I can't understand where this judge is coming from on this particular matter.
Yeah, and raindrops. I see you in the comments, and again, we're not saying it's right or wrong. All we're offering
Mm-mm.
you is the
An
juror said
explanation.
no. Yeah, an
Hmm.
explanation. The juror said no, he shouldn't be released on bail, and the judge decided no. We're not saying he was convicted of a freak off. We're not saying he was convicted of DV. What we are explaining is the judge's mindset to what Ebony broke down to a science, that those are things that they all took into account about what he could do to innocent people. Again, that's how they felt, and that's why was ultimately made the decision. Now, the issue of race obviously played a huge role in this case, just like it did O.J. Simpson's case as well. I do
Yes.
want to offer this. Um, former Abercrombie and Fitch CE, former Abercrombie and Fitch, okay, the
Hmm.
clothing apparel CEO, was arrested on federal charges. His name is, I want to get his name right, Michael Jeffries. So this is what's interesting that a lot of people did bring up, and I do understand from a
Hmm.
logical standpoint, raindrops, why a lot of people are comparing this. So Ebony, Michael Jeffries was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking for
Hmm.
allegedly getting models who were
Hmm.
modeling for his apparel line. He was allegedly doing things to them like sexual acts, drugging them, things of that
Hmm.
nature. He has been free on $10 million bond since not pleading guilty last October to the federal charges in Long Island.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people are like, oh, that white man was freed to be able to go home prior to his even court case, but
Hmm.
Puff wasn't. I do want to ask you this.
Yeah.
You are a historian of law, and you are a historian on Black culture, and you are a historian on the inception of racism.
Yeah.
Do you believe, Ebony K. Williams, that race played a huge role not only in the charges but also in the trial?
1001%. Let me be very clear on this, Carlos. Okay. I am all those things you said, and I humbly receive all of those accolades. And also, some of this is very simple. Okay. Raindrops, I don't want to be dismissive of the concern here because it is a legitimate concern as to how race and the inequalities of race and racism and race prejudice and bias show up. But this is a perfect plain example, Carlos, of what you just named. That white man who has very, very egregious charges against him, and I saw many of us have seen the documentary of the Abercrombie and Fitch. It's very, very horrible what he is being charged of as well. Depraved, offensive, violating behavior. And he enjoys the benefit of the presumption of not only innocence, because really every defendant is supposed to get a constitutional presumption of innocence before they are found guilty, right? That's the premise
Mm-hmm.
behind why anybody would qualify for pretrial release, right? And then you go from there. This white man is sitting at home in a way that Sean Combs was not permitted to sit at home for many reasons. But if you're asking me, Carlos, it's one of those reasons that the mere blackness of Sean Combs correlates to a often unspoken, sometimes unconscious presumption of violent propensity, because historically in this nation and abroad, black people and black men are presumed to be criminal because of our blackness. We're presumed to be violent because of our blackness. We're presumed to be a threat because of our blackness. You're goddamn right. Yeah, that is absolutely at play. That does not make it right. That doesn't make it legal. But I'm telling you what I know for sure. These are the biases, Carlos King, that myself and my colleagues as criminal defense lawyers have to be up against had to contemplate, think about, manage, and navigate when we do this work. Then when I put a client in front of a jury for any, probation violation, this, that, and the third, they're not just what they did and what they didn't do. It's the first thing I gotta attack or address are all the presumptions made about my client because of not just the blackness. Let's get into the colorism piece. Do you and the raindrops know that on average, and there is data to support this, the darker complected the black or brown individual is, the longer the sentence, the harsher the sentence. So these things are very real, and we have data to prove it. So do I believe the white Abercrombie and Fitch executive is reaping the benefit of presumptions of not violent and not harmful? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and raindrops to wrap up that example that a lot of people on TikTok have said. I do want to say this. Michael Jeffries, again, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, the court did find a preponderance amount of evidence that he is presently suffering from a mental disease or defect, rendering him mentally incompetent to the extent that he is unable to understand the nature and consequences of the proceedings against him or to assist properly in his case. So that was one of the reasons too, raindrops, that he was also allowed out on bail.
Ooh, well, we got to move on because I got something to say. Because
I know.
that is just know this, Carlos, that is a very rare occurrence. It's extraordinarily difficult, very rare. Very rarely in my career have I seen a defendant qualify for what you named, which is essentially to be deemed incompetent for the purposes of trial. And that is an extraordinarily high. Normally, you have to be a full-on schizophrenic. Let me just say it plain. Normally, the only people that qualify for that type of you're incompetent for the sake of trial purposes and you can't help your defense and therefore constitutionally we can't hold you accountable, you normally have to be full on schizophrenic. So that is it's not enough to just be bipolar or have a little bit of problems or be an addict. That is a very high threshold. So he has some real lawyering going on to reach that point. You better believe it.
And I want to go to the next topic. I'm gonna let Ebony get back to being a mommy and a boss and several outlets she's speaking on
let
as
me
well,
get back to my
including mine.
Capri Sun. This is how you know I'm a mama.
Okay,
I said,
that is
"Ooh, mama, you
Ebony's
get to
drink.
get a Capri Sun." Yes, Lord.
Yes, see, that's Ebony's drink of choice, ladies, gentlemen, day and gays.
Yes.
All right.
Mhm.
So speaking of the power of attorneys, I do want to mention a defense lawyer that was on Diddy's team. It's a gentleman by the name of Brian Steele. Brian Steele has now beaten 2 RICO cases in under 1 year. He was also the lawyer for Young Thug in the Young Thug trial. As we all know, Young Thug has since been set free. And now Diddy has been found not guilty on RICO charges. Brian Steele was also mentioned in superstar rapper Drake's song as well. Brian Steele is obviously celebrating. He spoke to the press conference outside of the courthouse yesterday. He, along with the defense team, were celebrating the verdict. Puff got down on his knees and prayed when the verdict was read that he was found not guilty on the more serious charges. He told his family, "I'm coming home soon." We found out he's actually not in terms of bail.
And up, Carlos. I'm sorry.
No, because I want to get the facts out. I want to get the facts out.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, Brian Steele is somebody that a lot of people are saying, similar to O.J. Simpson with Johnny Cochran, that when you are a celebrity or just a person of means, and by means I mean financial means, that spending that money to hire a good lawyer is the best way to beat a charge. Can you talk to us about the importance of that? And is there anything, Ebony, about Brian Steele and his ability to, which is, I'm assuming it's rare to beat 2 RICO charges in under a year?
Yes. No, let me be very clear and never let it be said that I'm a hater. Brian Steele and this defense team should absolutely be celebrating. There is no other way to lay it out. They won. They won. And this prosecution team failed. Okay, let's be very clear. And anybody framing it and coloring it differently is not keeping it a buck. Okay, so yes, it is exceptional, is what I would say, Carlos, for any defense lawyer to beat uh, RICO statutes over and over again in this quick succession, especially the federal one. Now, it's important to note that the Young Thug, that those were state RICO, and that's fine. It's still a very, difficult thing to overcome, and Brian still did so in the state of Georgia against Bonnie Willis and her defense, her prosecution team in the state of Georgia, and now he's been successful here in the Southern District. One thing I can tell you is Brian Steele's price yesterday ain't Brian Steele's price today. Okay, so raindrops and everybody else listening, get your coins all the way together. Um, because yes, he will now probably wear the crown as the preeminent defense attorney when it comes to RICO cases. I will say this: all lawyers and all defense lawyers even are not created equal. And I talk about this on Holding Court, Carlos. It's very important that when you are, when and if you or a loved one, raindrops, are charged with anything from RICO to DWI, the main thing you want to look for when hiring a lawyer is that that lawyer does that exact work frequently and successfully. So here's what I mean by that, Carlos. I could go out tomorrow and I've got a, heaven forbid, I'm looking to hire somebody to defend a DUI. I actually wouldn't hire Brian Steele, even though he's the guy right now, right? Because he is not in DUI court every day dealing with DUI judges and elements, and there's a system to being successful in that particular type of defense work, and it's the same thing for RICO. So Brian still has clearly figured out how to successfully chip away at the elements, chip away at the prosecution arguments, whether they be federal or state, and successfully poke enough holes in a prosecution for racketeering and conspiracy that allows his clients to get a good outcome. Now, let's keep in mind, only thing, what's his face? Young Thug wasn't
Mhm.
acquitted per se, right? But what Brian was able to do, because he was convicted of some things, but he had served so much time, he's released off of time served. But
Okay.
right? And also know that the judge wasn't playing with him, Carlos, and said, if you take a shit in Atlanta, because remember, he was banished away from Atlanta as a part of his sentencing. If you do anything suspicious, we're gonna bring your black ass right back to jail, and you're gonna immediately do not pass go, serve 10 years plus. So just framing all of that. So it
Yeah.
was a good
Yeah.
outcome, but you do have to walk a tightrope.
Yeah. Two more questions, Ebony. I'm gonna let you go.
Mhm.
Christina Corman, who is the former chief of staff of PUP, was
Ah,
also named as a co-conspirator in a lot of civil lawsuits when it comes to PUP. She has, of course, pled her innocence. She was not called to the stand at
mm-hmm,
all.
mm-hmm.
A lot of the raindrops wanted to know because she nor the bodyguards were called to the stand, and they just their testimony was not heard. Would these would they be also be charged ultimately, or what's going on with that?
I think had he been convicted of RICO, possibly so, that we would have seen
Okay.
those subsequent indictments. Because the strategy is we got the big fish, now we can go get the small ones. But because they were unsuccessful, Carlos, in making the case against Sean Combs as the ringleader of the enterprise, there is no chance. They have no probability of success trying to go for lesser players in the entity. I'll say this. I also think the fact that the jurors never heard from KK, the chief of staff, they never heard from any of these bodyguards. I think that weakened their RICO case because as much as we sat here on True Crime Thursdays and talked about, okay, we know that a business enterprise exists. Now the question is whether it became a criminal enterprise. But then you don't show the jurors the people that exist in the enterprise who allegedly took place, participated, or at least, what's the word, were complicit in the criminal activities that the enterprise was allegedly participating in. You can't make that
Mm-hmm.
argument as the prosecutors and then you not show me a wide variety of the players that are supposed to be a part of the criminal enterprise. I think that leaves a lot of questions on the table. Why didn't this jury hear from KK? Why didn't they hear from many of these bodyguards that the female victims testified? Well, he stood there and watched me almost get hit in the head with a frying pan, and he stood there and watched me get beat to death, and he stood there and watched me get hung over a balcony. Well, that would be great to support the evidence of that. So where are the testimonies? I think those are part of the reasons we got a not guilty on the RICO.
Okay, last question, Ebony. As we all know, Combs was found guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Both counts serve a maximum sentence of 10 years each, which, if you add those up, is a maximum sentence of 20 years. Several legal experts said getting the maximum sentence seems to be egregious. A lot of people said possibly 2 years. Ebony K. Williams, do you think the judge? Because I want to make sure is the judge's dissent is the
Yes.
judge's decision okay
Hmm.
on the sentence.
Hmm.
In your expert opinion, because you've been right all along, do you think Puff will get the maximum sentence, or will he get around the 2-3 years that everyone else has been saying?
Okay, so let's start with how a federal sentence is constructed because we have guidance, right? There
Okay.
are federal sentencing guidelines. Now, there used to be a time, Carlos, where that was what we call mandatory. You know, remember back, I'm sure you've heard the phrase in the streets, mandatory minimum. That sound familiar? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us have cousins and so forth that have had to serve mandatory minimums. Hello, somebody. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this goes back to um, Bill Clinton, 3 strikes. That's a perfect example of a mandatory minimum. No matter what the judge wants to do, no matter really what your lawyers argue, if you get convicted of this, the judge mandatorily must sentence you to that. That's how it used to
Got
be
it.
for these types of federal sentencing procedures. That is no longer the case in this type of case. So the judge has a sentencing guideline. That's where we're getting that 10 years from. So he can sentence up to 10 years per the federal sentencing guideline for each count of the prostitution convictions, as you perfectly said. He could also do that, what we call consecutively, if he wanted to. And like you said, that would give him 20 years conceivably. Now, typically, we would see those, if he was sentenced even to the max, he would be sentenced to concurrent sentences, meaning the 10 years for each would potentially be served at the same time. So I just want to make sure raindrops understand consecutive and concurrent. Now, this judge gets full discretion to adhere to that federal sentencing guideline of a maximum of 10 years. Or guess what, Carlos King? He can deviate. He has full discretion. Any federal judge has full discretion per this type of case to deviate from that sentencing guideline. Now, why would a judge choose to deviate? They would do so based off of a litany of either mitigating circumstances. So those would be things like, let's say, had Sean Combs in this case or winning defendant done checked into like a wellness clinic, right? And spent significant time there, 3 to 6 months of getting clean and sober, doing wellness rehabilitation work. That would be something at this part of the trial. The defense lawyer says, Your Honor, in mitigation of my client's convictions, note the work he has tried to do, the good when you try to make good, that's what the
Mm,
mitigating factor is. Another mitigating factor that does apply for Sean Combs, Carlos, he is a first time offender. As I said, he's been on trial before, but he has never been
mhm.
convicted of anything. So he's considered a first time offender for the sake of federal sentencing. But then there's aggravators. The aggravators are the thing that make it worse for you when it comes to sentencing. So it will serve as an aggravator that he is deemed to be a violent man per this judge. That Cassie tape, no, he's not convicted of anything on it, but all of it serves as an aggravating factor that colors the lens of just who we think this guy is. And the judge has every legal right. This is where I know I want Raindrops to get this, and this is a perfect final point. For those that feel like it's unfair for the judge to keep Diddy in custody until sentencing because he was acquitted on the heavier charges, not so. This judge has every legal right to assess the violent tendencies based off of everything that was exposed at the trial. And he could believe it or not believe it, right? Just like the jurors. You could believe it, believe some of it, or believe none of it. And this judge simply chose to believe some of that violence he saw on the tape. He chose to believe some of the violent testimonies that he heard people testifying to. And those are the aggravating factors that will ultimately lead to the sentence. So to answer you, Carlos, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't see him getting the maximum because he is a first-time offender. I think that's his greatest mitigating fact. And I think he'll probably get, I think, somewhere between 2 to 4 years.
2 to 4 years. Okay. All right. Ebony, I can't thank you enough for hopping on True Crime Thursdays to talk about this crime and this trial. So listen, Raindrops, give it up for the one, the only Ebony K. Williams, and make sure Holding Court is on your subscription podcast, okay? Platform, because she always dropped by. I love you, Ebony. Give my best to Baby
you.
Liberty, and I'll see you again, babe.
This was a pleasure. Love you. Love your Raindrops. This is amazing. See you soon, sweetie.
See you soon, doll. Okay, thank you. All right, Raindrops. Raindrops. Thank you guys so much for staying put for all of these weeks while Ebony and I broke down the trial. And thank you guys for watching our live. We'll see you guys on the next one. All right, Raindrops. Love you guys. And make sure to download, subscribe my podcast, Reality with the King, which is now under Charlemagne the God's Black Effect Network. If you haven't watched my Breakfast Club interview, go on YouTube and watch it now. It's an inspiring conversation between me and the co-host, and you may learn a little bit more about me. And follow me on TikTok. I'm going to start doing TikTok videos. It's at @VCarlosKing_ on TikTok. I dropped a video last night that people are like enjoying. More to come. Like, subscribe to Reality with the King, okay? See y'all soon. Love you all. Bye-bye.